unleashes a unique vision of a legendary tale.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars and welcome to another Halloween review, quite literally a Halloween review this time, because today I'm taking a look at the 2007 Halloween remake directed by Rob Zombie, and it stars Scout Taylor Compton, Malcolm McDowell, Tyler Mane, Brad Dourif and Sherry Moon Zombie. Now the film obviously is the remake of the classic 1978 John Carpenter film that in many people's eyes still remains quite controversial for a lot of reasons, I guess, some of them fairly obvious. And it's a film that seems a little bit Marmite amongst horror fans and Halloween fans, and I mean Halloween in regards to the franchise. Where do I sit on Halloween 2007? Well, I'm actually quite a big fan of it. I quite like this version of Halloween. And for those of you who don't know, and I suspect there's not many of you, this essentially tells the story of Michael Myers. Now, we, for the first time, see Michael Myers in his youth committing the murders and then in the hospital being treated by Samuel Loomis, Dr. Samuel Loomis, played brilliantly by Malcolm McDowell. So we get to see him grow up, we get to see him decline and further into darkness. And then eventually leading to him escaping from the asylum and heading back to Haddonfield in order to search out his baby sister, Laurie Strode, played by Scout Taylor Compton. So essentially, it's basically the same film as the first one with one massive difference. And this is, I think, one of the main reasons why, well, there's a few reasons, but I think most people who don't like the film basically say we don't need the beginning bit of Michael as a boy. I actually think that's one of the main reasons this film stands out. I think it's a really, really strong, and I mean really strong opening to the film. To get to understand Michael as a child, his descent into evil, madness, whatever you want to call it, slow decline over a 15-year period, and the utter failure of Dr. Loomis not being able to get through to him and make a connection, really. I thought it was tremendously done, and for me, it's the strongest part of the film. Because, for the most part, once he grows up and he gets out of the asylum, and we're a good chunk of the way into the film at that point, it then becomes almost a straight remake of the 1978 film. Very, very similar films from that point on. Apart from some of the scenes are drawn out more than the John Carpenter version. And Rob Zombie is not as delicate or as skilled as John Carpenter at building tension. Whereas John Carpenter is much more subtle in his approach, and he kind of stimulates you to the point where there's hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Rob Zombie's not as interested in that. He kind of gets your attention with a sledgehammer almost. You know what I mean? So the two very different approaches and very different visions in many, many ways. But as I've said, I do think the second half of the film is essentially a remake of the 1978 one. And it doesn't deviate an awful lot from that. Now, another thing that I do think this film does have going for it is the cast. I thought they really did a great job in the casting here. Everybody. Scout Taylor Compton as Laurie Strode, excellent, very relatable, nice, charming, and a character that you could kind of get behind. I thought that was some good casting. I thought the star of the film was Malcolm McDowell as Dr. Samuel Loomis. Perfect casting. And I think what they did to him in the sequel, Halloween 2, which I don't like, was criminal. They turned him into the pantomime villain in the second one, which I just thought was terrible. I thought He was brilliant in this. I mean, fantastic. Brilliant. I mean, he's a fantastic actor anyway. I can't honestly visualize another actor who'd been able to do it as good as Malcolm McDowell. And yes, we know Donald Pleasance will always be the real Dr. Loomis, but I thought it was a close damn second by Malcolm McDowell. And then we've got Sherry Moon Zombie, who, and I know these days it's a cliche that she's always in her husband's movies. But to be honest, I actually think she's quite a fine actress. I don't mind her too much, and I thought she was really good in this, playing Michael Myers' mother. Now, it's interesting as well, and you may or you may not know this. Now, John Carpenter was aware of this film. My understanding is, and there are interviews, you can find them on YouTube with John Carpenter, where he did speak to Rob Zombie. And Rob Zombie did kind of seek his consent and all this kind of stuff. And John Carpenter was very happy to give it and said, just go make your movie, all this kind of stuff. And then they kind of had a bit of a falling out. John Carpenter didn't like the fact that Rob Zombie said some derogatory things about him or something like that. And I don't know the exact quotes. So he's not very complimentary these days, John Carpenter, about A, Rob Zombie, and B, this movie. And his main criticism of the film is that Michael Myers is just too big. In the original Halloween, Michael Myers is just a man. It's more about the fact that it's this shape doing these things. You don't know, whether it's supernatural, what it is, or why someone would do the things he's doing. He's just a normal man with a mask on. Whereas in this version, Rob Zombie's version, he is a hulk of a man. He's like 6'6" or something like that. He's absolutely gigantic, which kind of explains his like superhuman strength and all this kind of stuff, and his ability to get up from being shot, and it takes away that supernatural element to some degree. So while I think it's an absolute sight to behold, this giant of a man, this Michael Myers in this film, I do kind of take on board John Carpenter's point that he was probably too big, but I don't think it spoils the film, and it just adds to the fresh approach that I think Rob Zombie took with this film. So, as I've said, I do think it was a massively strong opening to the film, and it's my favourite part of the film is the opening, the bit where Michael Myers is a boy, and then he's descent into evil and madness with all the masks he's making, and how he breaks out, and then the early part, how he makes his way to Haddonfield, and then for me, then it kind of almost becomes a straight remake of the original, just not as good in a lot of aspects. So I think this film generally gets a bit of a hard time for the wrong reasons. I actually think it's pretty good. Out of all the horror remakes that we have been subjected to over the years, this is, for me, in the top echelons of them by far. It deserves some respect, I think, this one. I do think it was, in many ways, a fresh, original approach on the story and the characters. I do think it ruined it a little bit with a sequel, which I think is terrible, really bad. But for me, I do think this one stands up, and I think it's a strong entry into the Halloween franchise. So let me know, guys, what you think of this Rob Zombie version, the 2007 version. I hope you enjoy your Halloween, guys, and I will, of course, be back with loads more content on the channel very soon.